Deleted episode of Peppa Pig. It was not worth going there. A cheerful atmosphere filled the house. Peppa, George, and Susie were gathering to watch a new cartoon. Mommy Pig was preparing treats, and Daddy Pig was telling funny stories. Suddenly, a strange creak sounded inside the house. Peppa and Susie exchanged glances, smiles fading from their faces.
What was that?
Asked Susie.
Probably just the wind.
Replied Peppa, but her eyes looked worried. The children decided to explore the house. In the bathroom, they noticed an old pipe pulsing slightly, emitting an ominous sound. Cracks were visible on its surface. Peppa, unable to resist curiosity, stepped closer. Suddenly, the pipes began to shake and whispering voices called out from within.
"Come down to us,"
they seemed to say from deep inside, and Peppa felt a shiver run down her spine. At that moment, Mommy Pig returned and sharply said,
"Children, don't go too close to the pipes.
Her voice sounded frightened.
These pipes could be dangerous."
But her warning only heightened their fear and their excitement. Unexpectedly, the pipes started stretching out like living creatures and grabbed George.
Help!
Shouted Peppa. Susie rushed to help, but was also caught.
"You won't escape."
A sinister whisper echoed, and Peppa realized they were trapped.
What to do? We can't leave!
Cried Susie. Peppa watched as the pipes pulled George into darkness. "Peppa! Susie!" He called out as his voice faded away behind the wall. Peppa and Susie were terrified.
Don't let go of each other!
Shouted Peppa, but it was too late. They felt cold tentacles of the pipes wrap around them, and soon they too were pressed against the wall, unable to move. At that moment, Mommy and Daddy ran into the bathroom, but upon seeing what was happening, they froze in horror.
"Peppa, George, run!"
Shouted Mommy Pig, but now the pipes began stretching toward them as well. The parents tried to run, but it was too late. The pipes seized them and they disappeared into darkness. When everything fell silent, only empty walls remained in the bathroom. Peppa and Susie, pressed against the wall, watched as the pipes became still again. Fear and despair flickered in their eyes. They understood that they had lost not only George, but also Peppa's parents. Deleted Peppa Pig episode, The Living Toy. George loved his dinosaur, but that day, the toy fell into a place where it shouldn't have gone. George didn't know some toys find their owners on their own. When George disappeared, Peppa decided to look for him, but she had no idea. She would have to search not for her brother, but for what had taken him. The trail led to the nursery, where it all began. The door to the nursery swung open, and Peppa saw a giant dinosaur holding George in its claws.
Give him back!
Peppa shouted, but the dinosaur already knew his name. Peppa tried to rescue her brother, but the dinosaur swatted her away with its tail. George mumbled. His voice sounded strange, as if the dinosaur was learning how to be him. Peppa grabbed a toy hammer and struck the dinosaur's paw. It dropped George.
Run!
Peppa yelled, but George didn't move. His eyes turned red. In the morning, George returned, but Peppa saw that now the dinosaur was always watching him. At night, a voice was heard behind the door.
"The little dinosaur. Mine."
He waiting, because children can be lost so easily, especially when they think they've been found. Deleted episode of Peppa Pig. On the other side, it was an ordinary day.
Wow!
Grandpa brought the family an old television. It looked strange, but it immediately turned on. It was showing memories, happy and familiar. But sometimes there was something extra in these scenes. At night, Peppa woke up to a strange crackling sound. The TV turned on by itself. It showed Mom, but with eyes that looked empty, erased. just for a second. In the morning, the scene repeated, only Peppa noticed. During the day, everything seemed normal. No one believed Peppa's stories. A little later, she saw Daddy Pig. He wasn't blinking. He was just staring.
See, Daddy, you see? Something's wrong.
Daddy Pig monotonously replied, "We've all been here before." Peppa searched for an explanation. With each day, everything in the house became stranger. Peppa whispered,
Mom?
She answered emotionlessly.
Don't look for too long, Peppa. You'll see too much.
Daddy disappeared. The screen hummed as if it knew this would happen. Peppa decided to act. She pulled at the TV cord, but it sank into the floor and disappeared. The TV had never been plugged in, never before. Now it showed only fear and nothing else. On the screen, family members without faces, Peppa inside it. She screamed but made no sound. Peppa tore off George's toy hammer and struck the TV. The screen cracked. From inside, thick black liquid flowed out. Something unpleasant and dark seeped outward. The TV was gone, but distorted reflections remained. Some things don't turn off, even if the screen is no longer there. Deleted episode of Peppa Pig, The Evil Force. An ordinary day, Peppa decided to draw, starting with a simple apple. But something went wrong, and the apple simply dissolved into reality. Peppa couldn't believe her eyes. Her desire to test her new power led to the next step. Each new drawing disappeared from her world. Soon,
Wow!
Peppa realized her power knew no bounds. She left home in the name of experimentation and set a new goal: the school. Every stroke of her marker became a new threat. The school began to vanish from reality. The facade flickered and dissolved away. Peppa looked at the empty field. She felt like a god in a world of ink, but someone was watching her, always watching. Peppa sensed that something was wrong and decided to return, but what she saw shocked her, freezing her with fear. The room seemed empty, but that was a lie. Sitting before her was her doppelganger, drawing something. With each stroke, he recreated her appearance, frightening and alien. Peppa froze in horror, realizing her power had gained its own will. The doppelganger looked at her with hollow eyes as she slowly dissolved into the space, unable to save herself. The deleted episode of Peppa Pig, The Porcelain Doll. Peppa finds an old, dusty toy box in the attic. Inside is a large doll with a porcelain face, but it doesn't have a face, just a smooth white oval. "What a strange doll," says Peppa, looking at her. George looks at the doll with apprehension and hides behind his mother. At night, it seems to Peppa that the doll is looking at her. She hears quiet whispers from her room, even though no one is there. The next morning, the doll is in a different place. Peppa tries to get rid of the doll, but it always comes back. One day, while playing with George, Peppa draws the doll's face with a marker pen. At first, it's funny, but at night, the face on the doll changes. Now it's an evil grimace with sharp teeth and glowing red eyes. Peppa is terrified. She realizes that the doll is alive and something bad is happening. She runs to Mama Piggy, but she doesn't believe her. At night, Peppa wakes up from the cold. She sees a doll by her bed. The doll stretches its porcelain hand towards her. Peppa screams, but no one comes. In the morning, Peppa disappears. George is playing alone in the garden, but he is no longer grunting with joy. He holds a faceless doll in his hands. Piggy's mom and dad are standing at the window, their faces full of despair. Their voices are barely audible. Where is our Peppa? Deleted Peppa Pig episode. One word. It was an ordinary day. She was sitting in the playroom playing with a ball. Suddenly, it started rolling slowly across the floor by itself. She looked at it in surprise. The ball stopped near the wall, and suddenly a strange rustling sound was heard, like someone whispering behind her back. Peppa turned around. Nobody was there. Suddenly, the toys began to move on their own. Dolls swayed without wind. Cars rolled across the floor without her involvement. Peppa was frightened and looked into the mirror. Her reflection was terrifying. Her eyes darkened and her smile widened more than usual. Suddenly, the toys disappeared. The room grew darker. A shadow appeared in the mirror, rapidly approaching Peppa. She tried to turn away, but the mirror seemed to suck her inside. She didn't notice how she fell into it head first. Peppa found herself in a strange, dark cave. A piercing scream shattered the silence. Turning around, she saw many small, poor piglets who had been trapped there for several years. She realized that escaping on her own and rescuing these little ones was her mission. Illuminating the walls with a flashlight, she saw mysterious symbols resembling a cipher. She struggled for a long time to figure out how to rearrange the elements to form a word. Suddenly, it came to her. She quickly drew the symbols in the correct order and obtained the word love. Suddenly, the walls trembled. Stones rained down and the cave collapsed with a loud crash. The piglets were set free. They found themselves on a bright meadow bathed in sunlight. The little pigs thanked Peppa, and she rejoiced at her new friends. They were celebrating when they didn't notice someone watching them from behind a tree.